Carlos Nelson with Cascade Media Group, and I'm so pleased to announce one of our contributors that started our What's Up Latin America channel. She's coming back, as they say, come on home. And her name is Jacquelyn Aguirre. Jack, I'll be calling you Jack. Tell our audience, pronounce your name to our audience.
I'm Jacquelyn Aguirre.
All right. Hey, Jacqui, go back to kindergarten and tell our audience a little bit about yourself. And you're getting ready to come back on board as a contributor. When you were with us, when you were at the University of Notre Dame, you basically did interviews, but now you're coming back and you'll be wearing a couple of different hats. So the floor is yours. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, my name is Jacqui. I was born in Kansas City to Mexican American parents. They are third generation Americans, so it was their grandparents who immigrated over from Mexico. My dad grew up on the west side of Kansas City, and my mom grew up in Independence. And then I think in kind of a real demonstration of what was happening, in the late 90s when I was born, they moved out to the suburbs, hoping to give me a head start in life. Um, the suburbs were primarily white at the time, so the school districts were considered better and the houses were nicer and the neighborhoods were safer. So out to the suburbs we went. And I grew up in primarily white neighborhoods and spaces for basically my entire life. Um, I was I went to Catholic school for the first part of my elementary school journey. And then my parents made the switch to public school because they wanted to expose me to more points of view. They wanted to expose me to a more diverse student population and different opportunities. And also because Catholic school is really expensive.
Look, give your schools some plugs. Let the audience know what schools you went to. Try to be
So
as
I went to St. Andrew's the Apostle Catholic School in Gladstone, Missouri, from preschool basically through fourth grade. And then I switched to public school and I did fifth grade at Line Creek Elementary and then went to Plaza Middle School, which at the time was the sixth grade center that Park Hill and Park Hill South both went into before they went back out for high school. So I went to Congress for Plaza for sixth grade and then Congress Middle School for seventh and eighth grade because I'm in the Park Hill School District. So I'm up north and I went to Congress and then I went to Park Hill High School.
Did you play
Um,
any sports, or were you in any of the clubs?
I was in a ton of clubs. I didn't play any sports.
Run the clubs down.
When I was transitioning from, middle school to high school, my dad kind of sat me down to have a very serious conversation with me at like 12, 13 about the value of education, and how important it was to do well in school and to take advantage of all the educational opportunities I had. So I had played a little bit of volleyball up into that point, and he was like basically told me I could pick between volleyball and school, and was like, realistically, you're probably not going to be a professional volleyball player, so it's kind of time to switch courses now. So I kind of quit doing any kind of sports after middle school and transitioned into high school. I was in, a fair number of advanced placement classes and in a ton of clubs. I didn't have a job. Luckily,
What
my,
was advanced placement? Tell our audience what that's about.
So some schools have what's called IB and some schools have what's called AP. So Park Hill had AP, and basically AP is a partnership with a local community college. For us, it was Maple Woods Community College, and they offer college credit for the classes that you take, certain classes that you take. So you take them at your high school. Um, and then at the end of the year, you or the semester, you take an AP exam and you're graded on a score of 0 to 5, basically. And for most places, um, 3 and above will get you college credit. So as long as you pass the class in high school, you get credit at Maple Woods for it. And then if you would like to go directly into a 4-year university instead of going to a community college first, if that's kind of when the 3, 4, 5 scores come into it. So if you scored a certain number on that AP exam, then that credit then gets to transfer to your 4-year university as a community college credit instead of a high school credit. So if you play your cards right, it is possible to graduate high school with an associate's degree from Maple Woods Community College. I wasn't in quite that many AP classes, but I was in a fair amount. So I was able to transfer a lot of that over to my undergraduate degree. So I went to the University of Notre Dame for undergrad.
How did you
And
get in there? Did you get financial aid? Did you get scholarship? Run that down to our community.
yeah, so I didn't know a single thing about applying for college. My mom went to nursing school, which is more of a vocational school certificate. It's a little bit different than the traditional 4-year university track. And my dad has a bachelor's degree, but he got it over the course of 6, 7 years because he was working his way through. So he also did not go on the traditional 4-year path. So they couldn't really give me any advice on how to apply for college, what I should be doing to apply for college. Um, I was very lucky that one of my school counselors, Miss Amanda, saw something in me while I was in high school. And my sophomore year of high school, she reached out to me and told me she thought I should apply for a program called Missouri Scholars Academy, which is a summer program. It's about 6 to 8 weeks, I think, a summer program held on the University of Missouri's campus in Columbia for 250 of the top high school students in the state of Missouri. So you kind of go to it and it's like a pre-college experience. You take 2 or 3 classes over the 8-ish weeks that you're there. And you get to hang out with other, we affectionately refer to it as nerd camp. So you get to hang out with other nerds at nerd camp. And that really, I think that was kind of like the turning point, the linchpin for my educational career, because up to that point, I had not really been around people that were so focused on academics that way. I mean, a lot of my friends were smart, but they were also, well balanced. They had lots of friends and they did sports and had jobs. And going to Missouri Scholars was kind of the first immersive experience I had with other people who were traditionally academically gifted and who were really going to pursue, very lofty educational goals with that. So getting to talk to them about what to expect with college applications. How do we prep for that? We're sophomores, but what do we need to be doing going into junior year of high school? Because, I mean, your path for college gets set fairly early on, which is something like a lot of people don't want to talk about because it's a lot of pressure to put on young people. The decisions you're making when you're 13 affecting like where you're going to go to college is a lot of pressure. But right now, at least with the way college admissions work, it is just kind of what it is. They look at your GPA, they look at your curriculum. So if you have an average GPA on an easy curriculum, you're less competitive than a student who has an average GPA on a really challenging curriculum. And I hadn't had those conversations yet with anybody in my life because nobody that I knew had really been on that path before. So MSA was a great turning point for me. I really like to shout them out because they are always having to go to the state of Missouri, to our legislature, and really lobby for their funding every summer. And they absolutely deserve all of the funding. It's such a great
Anyone in
opportunity.
particular, you remember any names? That's what I like when you give the shout out to different ones that influenced you.
I remember, yeah, my friend, my camp counselor was named Myra, and she is currently a law student, actually. So is really funny how that works. One of my other camp counselors, Jesse, went on to be a doctor. Very impressive. My good friend Savannah is getting her master's in fine arts in New York right now. So I feel, very, very inspired and lucky to have had that opportunity. And so here's my plug for, anytime you see the funding question come up, please sign on to those petitions, lobby your state legislature people. Like MSA is a phenomenal organization opportunity, and it really can like change the course of your educational life.
All right, run it down now. Your freshman year uh, in at Notre Dame, and run down your legal, all of that.
Yeah, so I feel like I kind of ended up at Notre Dame by accident in a lot of ways. My dad has been the biggest Notre Dame fan since forever. Notre Dame was kind of the pinnacle of higher education. If you were growing up Catholic in America from like the 60s to the 90s, Notre Dame was as high as you could get as a Catholic. Plus, the Notre Dame football team was really good in the 80s, so
And
he
the
was a big,
basketball team. My
yes.
roommate's brother was Austin Carr, and
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
and Austin upset UCLA when they were in their prime, and that really put Notre Dame basketball on the map.
Yeah. So Notre Dame was really dominating sports and academics, specifically in the 70s and 80s. And so my dad was a huge Notre Dame fan coming up. Um, and he was always on me to go to Notre Dame. From the time I was very little, he was like, you're gonna start for the football team at Notre Dame, and then you're gonna be a lawyer. And, listen, we got 2/3 of the way there. So I
Jack,
think that's
you
pretty
are
good.
silly. You're gonna start for the football team.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think that's gonna happen, but okay. So he's always been on me to go to Notre Dame. You're gonna go to Notre Dame, and when you're coming up, you never want to do what your parents tell you to do. So I was like, Notre Dame's stupid. I don't want to go to Notre Dame. It sounds boring and lame and
I'm going
blah.
to
I'm
tell you,
certainly not gonna play football. So when I was submitting my college applications, I just kind of applied to Notre Dame on a whim. Like it was a very last minute decision to submit my application there. And my thought process was, I'm going to apply so that when I get rejected, I can tell my dad, like, look, it wasn't meant to be. Like, I just wasn't meant to be at Notre Dame. Um, so imagine my surprise when I got an acceptance letter from them. Um, that was like crazy. So we went up to visit, and something about Notre Dame's campus is very hypnotic. You can be very staunchly anti Notre Dame, but being on campus will make you a fan of the Irish, at least while you're there. And that's where I wanted to go. The funding was very tricky. So there has been a massive shift in how they do undergraduate financial assistance since I was an undergrad. But when I was there, they did a profile on how much they thought your family could reasonably contribute and how much they thought you could reasonably take out in loans. And then they calculated a number that they were going to give you to make up for the rest. And of course, the funny bit about that is that Notre Dame is a very storied, wealthy institution. So their idea of like reasonable contributions from my family and reasonable loans was vastly different than mine at the time. So I got about 25 to $30,000 a year in financial assistance from Notre Dame, which shockingly enough still left me about 25 to $30,000 to make up to go per year, which was crazy. I'm very lucky. My family was able to give me some contributions, but really the reason I was able to go to Notre Dame is because Dr. Rios, who I did an interview with on Cascade Latin America a while ago, and Dr. Lawrence, who was another cardiologist that my mom worked for at the time, for just purely to see like a brown woman succeed and to pass along their good fortune, they combined to give me a $10,000 per year scholarship to help me make up the difference so that I could attend Notre Dame. So I got to go to school because of Dr. Rios and Dr. Lawrence really paying it forward. Both of them are very high achieving minorities. Dr. Rios is Puerto Rican, Dr. Lawrence is Black. For a while, he was one of the only Black cardiologists in Kansas City. And they, understand
Who was the
the
lady that you brought on, and the white patient thought she was the janitor or something?
that was my neighbor, Dr. Ajemian. She is a dentist she runs KU's dental surgery program now. So she's very, very impressive human. And, all these people in my life, really understood the importance of a good education, and one with a I don't like to be elitist about it, but one with the diploma from Notre Dame could really open a lot of doors for me. And as people who had gone to Harvard, Stanford, USC, Johns Hopkins, like they understood that. And just because they're such like kind people, they got together to get me an outside scholarship so that I could go to Notre Dame.
So run real quick through your 4 years and
Yeah, so
some of the people you met and some of your experiences.
I started there in the fall of 2015. And I think for a lot of other Latinos that I met while I was there, it was a really big culture shock for them to come to Notre Dame because Notre Dame is a primarily white institution in a very, very white portion of the country up in Northwest Indiana. But for me, I had the opposite experience. Like, this was the first time I was really being exposed to women and men from different backgrounds because I came from a primarily white, high school and a primarily white suburb. So that's where I met a lot of the diverse men and women that I still find so impressive. I interviewed my good friend Jasmine Flete for Cascade. She is so, so impressive. My good friend Liz Cook also went to Notre
What are
Dame with
they
me.
doing now?
Jasmine works for Google, helping create internet archives, where she gets to use her 5 languages and various other skills. And I'm not 100% sure what Liz does except succeed and look great while she does it. She's the best. So I had my friend Monica, my very good friend Monica, I met at Notre Dame. She is currently an attorney in Las Vegas. I had the opposite experience where going to Notre Dame was the first time I really got to meet a lot of diverse men and women who were really on the path to success. So I got my undergraduate degree. I got a Bachelor's of Arts in history and one in Spanish, with a minor in constitutional studies. I knew fairly early on in my college career that I wanted to go to law school. And I was in college at a very interesting time. I was a sophomore in fall of 2016, which is when Donald Trump was elected for the first time. So that I feel like also shaped a lot of what was going to be my life path. Shortly after that fall, the Muslim ban went into effect, and I saw on the news a lot of attorneys showing up at airports just for free, willing to help people who were suddenly in an uncertain position because laws had changed while they were on planes coming into the US, or laws had changed while they were in the airport waiting to go somewhere else, and now they didn't know if they were going to be able to come back. And I saw attorneys taking time out of their day to go try and help people for free. And that was very impactful for me. So that's kind of around the time I decided I wanted to go to law school. And the history degree helped with that. I knew I was going to do history always. Everybody is like very firm that that is a useless degree. I could not disagree more. But it did set me up for success in law school, what with all the reading and writing and source analysis and stuff. And my Spanish degree, I use all the time, reading and writing in Spanish. It's really great asset. So I had a really wonderful 4 years at Notre Dame. I studied abroad for the first time while I was there. I spent a semester in Athens, Greece, and there is something about experiencing life outside of the country that like you cannot get if you just stay in the country. The global perspective, how other countries view America and the impact that America has on other countries with our politics and our laws and our culture, and just how interdependent the globe really is, I think is a message that's hard to drill down on without experiencing it firsthand. So that was my first experience with that, was
Did you
getting to
feel?
spend a semester in
How
Greece.
did you feel about that? before we got off camera, I told you how I had traveled the world and how other countries and their citizens view us. And that view has really changed over, well, my over 50 years. Once upon a time, America wasn't the ugly American. Was we came with clean water and a lot of different things. Now I'm hesitant to even travel overseas myself.
Yeah, it was a very like light bulb moment experience. I think I have always been raised more progressive, and I was really able to make more informed decisions about that. The more educated I got, the more exposed to different viewpoints I got. And even so, it was a real light bulb moment for me. So I was abroad in the spring of 2018, which was right in the middle of the Trump presidency, the first Trump presidency. And people were like astounded and vaguely disgusted about like what we had done as a country. Greece doesn't have the same conversational taboos that America does. It's not as common in America to go up to people you don't know and ask them about religion or politics or, you know, those more sensitive topics. And that taboo does not really exist in Greece the same way. So I would be, you know, at a coffee shop talking to my friends, and people would hear our accents, which are very clearly American, and ask us if we were American. And when we would say yes, the first question out of their mouth was, "Why did y'all elect Trump? How did that happen?" And it was a light bulb moment for sure. I don't want to say I was embarrassed, but I definitely felt like I had explaining to do on behalf of the country at the time. Um, and that was true, you know, regardless. I think one of the great things about studying abroad in Europe specifically is that Europe is very interconnected. It really gives you the opportunity to go to a lot of different places in Europe. I was lucky enough to be able to go to several different countries, and
Get
it was
down.
I went to Belgium, the Czech Republic, Poland, Italy, Ireland, and Scotland.
Give a
And
quick synopsis of each evaluation in each one of them countries.
yeah, I think one of the misconceptions about Greece specifically is that it's a very Western European country, and that's not totally true. It is more the crossroads between East and West. So when we went to Belgium that first weekend, Belgium is a much more traditionally Western European country, you know, very organized streets, that block grid, everybody was in bed by 11. But it was still it was a very cool place to go, you know. America's not a very old country, and European countries are incredibly old. So, you know, in comparison to us at least. So, watching the span of the empire and, you know, things that Belgium doesn't talk about, like what they did in the Congo and King
Cut
Leopold
off all the
II. And
arms and
yeah, so I mean, it is it's nice, I guess, to see that America isn't the only country that kind of sweeps the icky parts of their history under the rug. But I did get to go to a museum that did kind of explore a little bit about King Leopold II and what he did in the Congo. So that was very interesting to get to see it in Belgium. The Czech Republic and Poland are more Eastern European. I think they're underrated. I think both of them are gems. Food was great, atmosphere was great, a much wilder feel than Belgium, for example, but still very old, beautiful architecture, a lot going on. Poland was very interesting. We went to Auschwitz while we were there, and you know, in an environment where we've got interesting stuff going on with Israel simultaneously with the rise of anti-Semitism going on and Holocaust denial. Like I didn't and I knew that that would be a powerful experience when I went, but I didn't anticipate how relevant it would be, you know, 5, 6, 10 years in my future. And I think everybody who has the opportunity to go to Auschwitz should absolutely go to Auschwitz. It's a very powerful, moving experience. Um, and we also went to Krakow while we were in Poland. And that was really cool because Krakow is the only city in Poland that survived World War II intact because it was Russia's or
right.
Germany's headquarters when they invaded Poland. So Krakow is the only city in Poland where you will find architecture that predates
That
World War
history.
II. Yes, and the history of it. So that was really beautiful. I went to Italy for spring break. I went to Easter Mass at the Vatican, which was an incredible experience as a lifelong Catholic. And Pope,
Spiritual. Did you feel
yes,
all right?
it was beautiful. Pope Francis was the Pope at the time, and I think Pope Francis was a very influential Pope for me. Pope Benedict, I remember John Paul, Pope John Paul II passing away and how big of a deal that was because he was kind of the first Pope post World War II to kind of expand the church back out onto a global stage. And I remember that being a massive deal when he passed away. But the first Pope that I really have solid memories of is Benedict, Pope Benedict, who is either very popular or very unpopular, depending on what kind of Catholic you are. He tends to be very popular among more conservative Catholics and maybe a little less popular among more progressive Catholics. And then Pope Francis happened, and he was a massive change for the Catholic Church. He is the first pope from outside of Europe. He is the first pope from Latin America. He was Argentinian.
How'd you
He
feel about
was
that?
I felt, yeah, it was great. I don't know that Argentinians all the time identify the same way that, Mexicans do. Back to that World War II history, a lot of Italians fled to Argentina after World War II to
And
avoid,
Germans.
yep, to avoid extradition and all those fun war crime tribunals that were happening. So you'll find a pretty interesting social hierarchy going on in Argentina that's not it's really difficult to find. It's not really analogous to any other social structure in Latin America. But nevertheless, he spoke Spanish. He was very proud of being from Argentina and from being Latin American that way. And he also took the church on a more progressive path for the first time in my memory, at least. So going to church at the Vatican, I was there the year that he baptized the African migrants who had saved a bunch of Italians in a fire not too long before that happened. And it was beautiful to get to witness. I loved Pope Francis. I was in Scotland very briefly on the way to Ireland, and both of those countries are really interesting because if there ever was a white population who could identify with being colonized and kind of stepped on, it would be the Scots and the Irish, what with their English occupiers. And that is very, very prevalent in the culture in
Saying it's in
Scotland.
their DNA.
Yes,
In
it's
England
very
and
prevalent.
all of
Hmm.
that, that's still underlying in what Scotland and the Irish, we
Hmm.
got it
You'll
tamped
notice
down, but
You'll notice historically that Ireland is always ride or die for the oppressed group at any given moment. And that's because they really relate to being oppressed, to having their country occupied, to being wiped out. Like they, and that aspect of their culture and their history is prevalent in their culture today. And that's a very unique experience. It's kind of one of like the only two places in the world you really get that in a primarily white country. Um, but it was a phenomenal experience. So, and yet across all of these countries that have wildly different, cultures and norms and histories, I felt like I was constantly explaining what was going on in America because no matter where I went, all of them were like, what the
what are
heck
you all
was
doing?
that? Yeah. So, that was a very good experience for me. I think it was a good experience for my classmates as well. I went with almost all, other white classmates because Notre Dame is a primarily white school. And, being kind of prejudged and side-eyed for being American was like the closest a lot of them had ever come to being
Reality
stereotyped.
of what's going on besides in America's camp.
Exactly. And at the time, it was interesting to watch them kind of reconcile that, like kind of go through what I feel like I've always kind of grown up. You go through it as you grow up when you grow up brown or black in the US is like work twice as hard to get half of what they have. And you have to represent your people well because you might be the first, black person, the first
They don't
Mexican that,
see none of that. They don't
yeah,
see any of that because you're here, you have the majority population, you have the power. It's no different from what's going on in our judicial and in our electoral. It's like, y'all got
yeah,
everything. You got the
yeah,
Senate, you got the Supreme Court, you got. Why are you so angry? Why are you
yeah,
so everybody's taking from you? And they don't see it here, but the moment you step out this country, you 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 get that feeling, I want to get back home.
yes. And it was slightly different. I feel like a lot of the profiling that minorities deal with in America is if they're darker, if they're visibly minorities, and that so in that sense they weren't having trouble because they're all white,
They
so
open up
they're
their mouth though.
yes. As soon as that American accent registers, they were dealing with all of these preconceived notions and stereotypes and profiles about Americans and white Americans in particular. And I think it was the first time a lot of them had run into something like that. And I think I can't speak for them, of course, but I think it was a very valuable experience for them
They
to,
know it's valuable. Now let's go get out of Notre Dame, where you at, what you doing, to where you're at now.
yeah. So after undergrad, I went to law school, also at Notre Dame. I'm in a cult, what can I say? So I went and got my law degree at Notre Dame. I feel like I'm always there when crazy stuff happens. I was also there for the 2020 election. When Biden was elected, I was there when Amy Coney Barrett was placed on the Supreme Court to replace Justice Ginsburg. Um, I feel like I've been there for a lot of
Pivotal
watershed moments
moments.
in my memory. Yeah. And I feel like that has really shaped my perception of those memories. In undergrad, I was with a lot of people who were horrified to see Donald Trump win in 2018. Kind of on the flip side, being in the law school, I was with a lot of people who were horrified that Biden won in 2020. So I feel like I have two wildly different experiences at Notre Dame, but I am grateful for both of them. So I went and got my law degree in 2023 is when I graduated. Studied for the bar, which is a terrible experience that I would not wish upon my worst enemy. But luckily I did pass it. So I took the bar in the summer of 2023, and then I promptly dipped out to Europe for a month to help recover brain function from studying for the bar. And
What
that was
part?
another
What part of
that was
you?
another interesting switch, though, what was going on, because now, in 2023, Biden was president, and the attitude towards America was much different in 2023 in Europe than it was in
Where were
2018
you
when I was
at in
there.
Europe at that time?
I was in Greece, Italy, and Ireland, very briefly in Ireland, but I didn't, not once did I have anybody ask me what the heck was going on in America while I was over there. And there was a sense of maybe not relief is the right word, but they were not they were certainly not constantly on edge that America was about to do something crazy or wildly unprecedented on an international scale. So it was two very different experiences being abroad and under Biden than it was being
Run
abroad under
down
Trump.
your current situation and how long you've been there.
Yeah, so after I got back from Europe, I started work at Shook Hardy and Bacon, which is a law firm here in Kansas City that does primarily corporate defense work. And I've been there ever since. So I just started my third year at Shook this September, and it has been a really, really, really great experience. I definitely didn't go to law school to be a corporate defense attorney. Those always kind of sounded icky to me. What with defending corporations. And I definitely think that some of that is still present in terms of sometimes finding it difficult to reconcile my personal belief system with what I do for a job. But on the flip side, Shook has so many resources and they're so plugged into the Kansas City community. And being a part of a firm like that is make doesn't like it makes me feel great. They have a huge pro bono practice going on, um, where they offer free legal services from very high class trial attorneys to, to causes that those attorneys are passionate about across the spectrum. We do, family law and guardianship. We do veteran work for veterans. We do immigration and asylum work. We do gender affirming work. Like we do all kinds of pro bono work, that really positively impacts the Kansas City community. And that definitely makes me proud to work at Shook.
All right. Now let's get where the tire meets the road.
Yes.
And the tire meets the road as you becoming back to Cascade Media Group as a contributor. Now, audience, you see all of the experience this young lady has had and talk about some of the things that you hope to amplify messages on your show.
Yeah, I really want to demystify what's going on legally in the United States at any given moment. I think the legal field has always been one that's very dense and difficult to understand to someone who doesn't have a legal education. Between the crazy sentence structure and the jargon and the legalese and the gazillion step long process of a case from the time it's filed to the time it's resolved, just like on a micro level. And then, you have the macro level about like, what is the difference between a state court case and a federal court case? Why does what the Supreme Court does have lasting impact? Why is this Supreme Court, always in the headlines? Like, what are they doing that marks them as different than previous Supreme Courts? All of these things are really difficult to run into in a digestible way if you don't have experience in the legal field and understanding these things. So that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to getting to do
Breaking it
with
down,
Cascade.
breaking it down
Yeah, it's kind
in
of
articles
explaining it
and
explaining it in ways that make sense so that you understand what's happening and why it's important, and perhaps why it's revolutionary in good ways or bad ways. There is a lot going on legally right now, and there has been for the past year, especially. There's been massive shifts in the legal landscape in the US across legal divisions. Like, there's not one part of the law that has remained completely untouched in the last year. Criminal law, civil law, constitutional law, space law. Like, there is a wide variety of legal fields out there, and all of them have shifted in some marked way since this time last year. And I feel like that is not talked about as often as it should be, because it's so difficult to explain to people or to break down in a way that makes sense.
all right. So we're getting ready to close out because I'm looking to press you for your first articles and your first guest. But now I want to go in retrospect. I want you to uh, deliver a message to a young freshman high school student, especially uh, of Hispanic uh, origin, what you would, this is specifically, you can deliver a message to everybody else, the colored people and everything, but deliver a message that you would want them to hear.
The first would be education is so important, and that path starts unfurling very early on in your high school career. You coming in as a freshman and you're thinking, like, oh, I'm only 13. Doesn't matter what I do right now. And in some senses, that's true. You have a long time to learn from your mistakes. But in a lot of ways, what you do now is kind of starting to set you on the road for where you're going to go. And education is so important. I know there has been a really big disillusionment among young people, millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha, about education, because it's not a guarantee. It's not the same guarantee for us that it was for our parents and our grandparents, but it is still so, so, so important. Those liberal arts skills, especially, history, the social sciences, literature, these are such fundamental and important classes. They teach you critical thinking skills. They teach you how to analyze your sources. They teach you how to form arguments, waterproof arguments, and they teach you about how to recognize weaknesses in somebody else's argument. They teach you reading comprehension. They teach you how to write. These are such important skills, and they will serve you far beyond education in the future. You know, being able to look at a source, you see a headline, and being able to analyze that source to determine what is the agenda behind this headline is a skill that you will use for the rest of your life. That doesn't just last while you're in high school. Determining who is it that's trying to sell me this and why are they trying to sell it to me is a skill that you will use for the rest of your life. So education is incredibly important. Even if your degree is not a guaranteed ticket to a seven-figure job and a house as soon as you graduate. Like all of those skills, all of those building blocks are irreplaceable and they're so important, especially now in the era of AI, false information, of clickbait, and those attention-grabbing headlines that are really lacking in substance. In an era where all of this misinformation, disinformation, false information, and not human generated information is going around, being able to critically analyze your source to understand what it's saying and why it's saying it is so, so, so important. And then my second bit is to be kind to yourself. I feel like that's an incredibly overlooked piece of advice for minorities, especially. We come up having to work really, really hard and to represent our families and our cultures really, really well. And that's a lot of pressure. And you cannot succeed at the level that you could otherwise if you're burnt out, if you're tired, if you're stressed, if you can't focus, if you can't retain new information, then you simply are not going to be able to succeed at the level that you could if you're kind to yourself. So I think that's wildly overlooked among minorities, especially, is to give yourself grace, give yourself space to grow so that you can reach the heights that are available to you. Like there is nothing that you can't do as a minority student, as a Latina, as a Black high school student, brown immigrant. Like there's nothing that you can't do, but you have to do it in a sustainable way because, soaring through to college and then burning out right away is like not going to serve you well in the long run, and it's not going to serve your community well in the long run. So you can't water from an empty well. Take care of yourself. It is so important, especially now with, social media everywhere and accessible 24/7, 24/7 news cycles, climate change, the economy. Like there's a million things to worry about. But one thing that you can control is giving yourself grace and being kind to yourself while you learn. You're still very young. You have so much to learn. You have so many mistakes to make. And you can't learn from them if you're constantly beating yourself up over making them in the first place. So get your education and be kind to yourself while you do it.
Excellent. And I think that's perfect lines to end on. I'm looking forward to you coming back doing some things in Spanish and in English. Uh, so, as we always end, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
This is brought to you by Kansas City Business Association, working to improve our community.